When looking at a lot of crashes that happen on the track for less experienced riders, you can often put many of them down to similar causes. In this video, we're going to talk about a very common cause of crashes for riders on the track, and one that I absolutely want you to take notice of so that it doesn't catch you out in the future. At track day level, a large majority of crashes will be a result of loss of traction from the rear tyre, usually around corner exit. You don't often see track day riders losing the front, simply because it's rare that they'll be pushing the front hard enough for it to break traction, especially if they're on decent tyres designed with track days in mind. When talking about rider errors specifically, like I said, it's usually a loss of traction at the rear end that sends riders on a trip to the gravel trap. Unfortunately though, when this happens, riders are too quick to dismiss the issue as being down to a worn out tyre or simply being too greedy with the throttle. But there is a very common issue you see among losses of rear end traction, and one that's not as well known as it should be. I call it throttle and lean. So what is it and why is it bad? Put simply, it's the act of applying throttle to accelerate and trying to steer the bike and add lean angle at the same time while at high lean angles. As you may or may not know, it's okay to add a bit more lean angle in the middle of the corner, maybe as you work to cut back to a late apex. It's also okay to very gradually roll the throttle on at high lean angles as you transition from the mid-corner phase to the exit phase. But doing those two things at the same time is playing a very risky game, and it's something I want you to avoid at all costs. It's a mistake that catches many people out, even to a very high level. So why does the rear tyre let go in this instance? It's my feeling that there are two main issues why doing these two things together causes the loss in traction. The first is how the gearing is changed as the bike leans over. When a bike leans over, it moves from a larger diameter section of the tyre to a smaller one, which effectively lowers the gearing of the bike. This is why when you listen to a bike that leans over very quickly, the RPM will actually rise. This isn't because the rider is trying to accelerate in that moment. It's because they've simply moved onto the smaller diameter section. Again, this is fine if the rider has the throttle closed, or even in a neutral position at a steady speed. But if you're beginning to roll the throttle on in this phase, then consider how your input changes. As you increase lean angle and shorten the gearing, the torque applied to the rear wheel by your throttle rolling on will actually begin to increase, meaning it wants to spin up faster as you lean over, even if your physical throttle action doesn't change. This in itself could be enough to step over the traction limit. But another factor comes from the fact that you're asking the bike to do two different things in that moment. Once you get back to the gas to start your mid-corner maintenance throttle, the bike will then want to hold the line it's currently on. Or if you roll on enough so that you begin to gain speed, the radius of the curve you're on will begin to widen and you'll begin to move farther away from the inside of the corner, because you're adding speed. To then press on the inside bar to try and tighten the line goes right against what you're asking the bike to do with the throttle. This conflict, together with the gearing we just talked about, adds up enough to surpass the traction allowance you have and cause the rear tyre to break away. A prime example of this is at corner exits. You see this happening a lot at corner exits where riders have gone wide. They realise they're running wide, so they lean the bike a bit more to get back onto a good line. But they still maintain their original throttle plan and continue rolling it on at the exit as normal. The result? Added lean plus normal exit throttle equals loss in traction. This is exactly what I did on my very first track day. And while it took me a long while to figure out what happened because I was so new, once I did figure it out, it definitely didn't happen again. And while not corner exit on the track, this clip demonstrates perfectly the result of throttle and lean. The rider turns into the left-hand corner, starts applying their mid-corner throttle, but then incorrectly continues to do that while at the same time continuing to add lean angle. One trouble is that the track tyres of today are so good that they'll mask the issue for a lot of riders, and you may not experience problems until you're going much faster and closer to those limits. In which case it's worth nipping this in the bud right from the start so that it doesn't cause issues later down the line. So what about lesser lean angles? For a lot of newcomers, it's only once the bike is fully upright that they'll start applying some accelerating throttle, let alone full throttle. However, at slight lean angles you can actually apply full throttle without issues. Watching MotoGP riders go through turns 6 and 7 at Assen is a prime example of this. This is because the cornering forces acting against the tyres is much lower, so you have traction allowance to use for acceleration. So, you can in fact apply the throttle, even full throttle, while adding slight lean. So really your rule should be that as you approach high lean angles, it's best that you don't add throttle while adding lean angle at the same time. There really shouldn't be any corners that demand this from you if you approach things correctly. As I said before, the biggest one to watch out for is in high degree corners where you're cutting back for a late apex. In corners like this, there's a big temptation to begin rolling the throttle on before the line is properly set, because riders want to achieve good acceleration, just like this rider does. Now in this case he's got away with it, but he's playing a dangerous game. If you can see yourself doing things like this, it's something I want you to work to remove from your riding as quick as possible. Is this an error you've seen in your riding, or maybe it's even caused a crash for you? Tell us about it in the comments down below, and as always, if you like the video then please hit the button and subscribe to the channel for more performance riding advice and guides moving forward. Take care.